draw their own proverbial line in the sand. And that, my friends, is what happened in the 1992 riots when a group of men became legends and are known to this day as the Rooftop Koreans. If the live stream's up, we'll have a picture up for you to see it, but there's pictures of the Rooftop Koreans. Let me tell you about them. So in 1992, Americans watched South Central Los Angeles go up in flames on the news. Tensions inside the neighborhoods, a mix of racial minority demographics, all long plagued by urban blight. It reached a boiling point after multiple incidents of racial violence. And then all hell broke loose when white police officers detained and beat a black man named Rodney King. And in April of 92, a jury, having heard the evidence, acquitted the officers, and the rioters took to the streets in a racially charged period of mayhem. I mean, like mayhem. Acts of violence became the norm. Looting and burning of buildings were daily occurrences. Leading up to this time, the immigrant community from Southeast Asia had grown tremendously, and there was a growing resentment between black activists and the influx of Koreans who had legally immigrated and begun setting up their own businesses in South Central LA. Angry mobs targeted a Chinese immigrant named Choi Si-choi and a white trucker named Reginald Denny, beat them on live TV during coverage of the riots. It was black residents who actually saved the victims, pulled them out of harm's way. But it overall still added to the chaos. Well, the 1992 LA riots lasted for 5 full days. According to resident accounts, law enforcement really did little to quell the unrest. The LAPD was unequipped to handle the looting crowds, and they pulled back and they left South Central residents on their own, including the businesses in the Koreatown neighborhood. Well, over the course of the violence, 60 people were killed and over $1 billion in property damage was done. And 40% of that damage was done against Korean American stores and businesses. But there was a group of Korean Americans, though, who decided to stem the tide. They had immigrated lawfully to America to build a better life for themselves and their families, and they had staked everything to build dry cleaners and restaurants and shops and newsstands. And they were watching as angry mobs yelling epithets against them set fire to their dreams. Well, to this day, the Korean American community in LA still refers to the riots as the Sai-igu, which translates to April 29th, much like the nation refers to the terrorism of 2001 as simply 9/11. The Korean American community in LA uses that date to signify the day when things went bad. But on Sai-igu, April 29th of 1992, the Korean American community, they weren't going to take it lying down. It became apparent the authorities had no means to control the streets. So these Koreans armed themselves. They did. And the word went out on a Korean language radio station that volunteers were needed in LA's Koreatown. And they turned out in droves. Images still abound of Korean men, many of whom had served in the South Korean army, just standing on rooftops, literally, standing on rooftops, turning out in droves, standing up there with shotguns and hunting rifles and AR-15s, and they stood their ground. And they stayed there for days. They used walkie-talkies to communicate back and forth across the buildings. They had multiple times when there were warning shots fired at potential looters, but the records of the events don't record a single person having been killed by one of the rooftop Korean guards, but their properties were saved. Yes, they were. Their stubbornness and their honor and their sense of doing what was necessary has made them the stuff of legend, the source of memes for decades. During the whole series of events, the Korean Americans and even the non-Korean Americans in that community supported the efforts of their citizen militia. They brought them food, supplies. They were much loved. It was about the protection of property. It was about preserving life and a way of life. It was about empowerment. It was about deterrence and not allowing evil to have its way. It was about self-reliance and proving that they could stand up under duress. In the end, the 1992 riots went on so long that President Bush finally activated the U.S. military presence, and he sent 15,000 troops into South Central LA to quell the riots. But the damage had been done, and a legend had been created. The Rooftop Koreans. There have been documentaries, news stories, graphic novels, and even coffee mugs made about them. They have been immortalized as a symbol of what happens when good folks get pushed too far and feel like their government's letting them down. They've been extolled by defenders of the Second Amendment as examples of what can actually happen if an armed citizen stands and tries to deflect and dissuade crime by merely being there and standing armed in the gap. But I have to wonder, though, is there still that level of citizen commitment? Are we going to see rooftop Koreans or some sort of similar stand taken in today's melee out there in LA? I mean, right now there's pallets of bricks being delivered to the protesters. And you got mayors and governors and former vice presidents cynically calling on the protest to continue. What happens, though? What happens when good people feel pushed too far? Government has a purpose, it does. The founders intended for a government to provide for the common defense, establish the rule of law, ensure that life, limb, and property are protected. And there are some things that governments are designed for, like fighting our nation's wars, establishing trade with foreign nations, protecting the vulnerable by means of police and fire departments, ensuring equal justice, enacting laws through representative bodies of elected citizens. But I also believe that the value of the private citizen, the private effort, is also what makes this country so great. We should never desire to be a nation of low-level non-producers who just reach out to the government for the next stimulus check or the next handout or the next excuse why we don't have to go to work. A nation where productivity is stymied by so many regulations that folks just give up and quit trying. Where taxation becomes so onerous that people choose not to produce. And most importantly, perhaps, we should never consent to being a nation where lawbreakers have more sway than law abiders, where illegal aliens have more rights than legal citizens. We should never approve of anarchy or agree to lawlessness. Law enforcement and civil order are essential services of government. They are. And when government fails to provide those essential services, to include law and order, what's a citizen to do? At that point, you can become a victim or you can stand. You can stand like a rooftop Korean, staring down the enemies of your way of life and daring them to cross that line. And that's a wrap for the Rightside Way. Well, I know the stream is up now, so I hope you got to see the pictures. If you haven't, just Google them, man. I mean, rooftop Koreans, it's a thing. They're still out there. And in fact, some of them have gotten very active on social media again this week because the memories are still so vivid. 1992 doesn't feel like that far away, especially when you see things burning in the streets again in LA. Rooftop Koreans, citizens standing in the gap. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Y'all stay tuned. We'll be right back. right, we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Solid conservative, just plain right. Just saving the world one soundbite at a time. All right, hey, text lines are open, 833-687-4448. That's 833-68-RIGHT. Text it or call it. Same number for both. Yeah, we got plenty going on around here. By the way, some of these texts coming in already, I can just tell you guys are like engaged on this topic. So let's jump on in where you can and hang on today, because I have a feeling this could be almost a single dipper day there, JP. We'll wait and see. Got to tell you guys about attorney Stan McDonald, though, first of all. So yeah, Stan McDonald. Law firm is Wilmer and Lee. He's a partner there. He's a 30-year veteran in the practice of law in North Alabama. And listen, I'm saying not only will Stan advocate and fight for your legal needs, he's good at it, but I know him personally, and I can say without any uncertainty that he is the guy who's been in the mix, in the fray, in the trenches as a warrior for all the legal policies and politics that right-side ruffians care about for like years. So yeah, he's an OG ruffian from way back. He has represented, Stan McDonald has represented his clients in literally thousands of real estate transactions over the years. He knows how to represent you in any local, state, or federal court. I like to say, I always do, that if Stan is on your side, you're going to have no greater friend. And likewise, your adversaries would have no greater foe. So I'm going to tell you how to reach Stan McDonald. You ready? I'm going to give you his phone number. Stan McDonald, law firm is Wilmer and Lee. Here's the number, 256-479-3020. That's Stan McDonald, 256-479-3020. And tell him you heard about it on Rightside Radio. I would appreciate that. Okay, let's see how this goes. No representation made. The quality of legal service we perform is great. The quality of legal service for the lawyers. Shut my mouth.
It's another 10, I guess.
Shut my mouth. Just stepping on back in amazement, baby.
I guess the bit's over if you just keep getting 10s.
It's not a bit. It's a very important thing.
There you go. Yeah.
Okay. Text. Let's see what I can get for the music starts playing. Mark from Tony, Alabama says, New Scum. Oh, I see it. New Scum and Bass need to be locked up yesterday. If liberal leaders aren't locked up, things aren't going to change at all, brother. Mark, I am not disagreeing, and I'll tell you right now. There's talk. I mean, so Newsom was all about Tom Homan can just come arrest me personally if he wants to. Don't throw me in that briar patch. Here's the bottom line: you are sworn to uphold and defend the laws of your state and nation, Mr. Governor and Miss Mayor. If you can't do that, then just get out of the way. And if you can't do that and you're actively opposing that, then you may have to face consequences. And I hope that, listen, at the very least, I hope the people of the state begin calling for their heads. They should. I mean, Mayor Bass has already presided over those epic fires that just swept through. And it turns out a lot of it was stuff that could have been prevented, but she was just such a horrible administrator. She was too busy running around doing liberal policies and changing things and DEIing this and taking trips on the public dime. Meanwhile, huge swaths of LA burned, and now LA's burning again. And she's literally saying, we do not intend to cooperate. Who's we? Who's we? Is she really weeing this thing? It's her office. That's who's saying they won't cooperate. Ken from Harvest says, time to send in Snake Plissken. Do you have any idea what he's talking about there when that's said?
I don't know.
Okay. This like cult classic movies. Escape from New York, followed by a really bad remake or sequel called Escape from LA. Snake Plissken.
Check it out.
Classic character. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio, Snake Plissken. We'll be right back. Hey, all you Rightside ruffians out there, you are listening to Rightside Radio, solid conservative, just plain right. And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio, solid conservative and just plain right. Just covering down on some major ground across the southeast US of A. Y'all are talking about this show goes like from Huntsville back on over to Chattanooga. I'm talking about from Tuscaloosa back on to Gadsden. I mean, all the way down to that loveliest little village on the plains we like to call Auburn, straight across the border from there to what we now call, once again, Fort Benning. Fort Benning. And then big old patches of North Georgia and Mississippi all thrown in just for good measure. And that's just the radio audience. Oh, man. Then there's all y'all out there in the whole wide world, going to the World Wide Web, watching us right now, live streaming on YouTube, X, Facebook, our website. Anyway, thank you. And then picking it up by podcast sometimes later on, too. Thank you very much. We love y'all. This audience makes everything worthwhile. Text messages again. And JP, you chime in anytime you got something over there on our YouTubes and all. Scott from Russellville says, excellent, thought-provoking monologue, my friend. Keep it up. Thank you, Scott. Appreciate you, man.
Well, we got Brother Rayson on the Facebook.
Brother Rayson
said, this fourth-gen American stands for Jesus Christ and the right side way.
There you go. Thank you, Rayson. Appreciate you. That's Rayson in Hawaii, by the way. Tom from Decatur says, reminds me of the Republic of Korea soldiers of Vietnam, the ROC soldiers. They were legends. Indeed. Paul from Decatur says, hey, Colonel, Paul in Decatur, great monologue. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate you. Jeff Rowe from Indiana, long text. See what he says here. Says, Phil, this is what the Second Amendment was meant to do. Protect yourself from harm or a tyrannical government. But these days, and in California, I think if the Koreans did this again, instead of calling out the National Guard to quell the rioters, it would be called against the Koreans for having guns and trying to protect themselves. Peaceful protest is guaranteed under the Constitution, but when you have destructive and killer riots, I believe we should go back to the good old days when rioters were shot when they were looting or arson and threatening the life of someone else. Then we would have very few riots. We would have very few riots. Yes, we would. Yeah, if you didn't hear the monologue, I want to encourage you, go check out Rooftop Koreans. It's still a thing, man. In fact, I just started following one of them, and he's much older now, obviously. He's gray haired, but he's got his own social media account, and I follow him, and he's putting up a lot of memories and talking about things. And anyway, Rooftop Koreans, it's an amazing story. It's an American story if you get down to it. Rooftop Koreans is an American story. How about that? Susan from Elkmont says, I've been reading some theories that the LA situation is part of a bigger plan to start a civil war so NATO and their blue hats can swoop in and make us part of the NWO, the New World Order. No, I don't agree with that, Susan. I don't. I don't think we're going to see the United Nations come swooping in because of an isolated instance in part of Los Angeles. What I do believe is happening, though, is that there are professional agitators. Absolutely. I think there are people who want Trump to fail, who want our country to face strife. That's why you're seeing professional agitators literally coming in from out of state. And they do this. Remember during the Summer of Love 2020, there were people who would show up and you would see them in the pictures in, Minnesota, and then they were in Michigan, and then they were in Wisconsin, and then they were, down in Chicago, and then why? Because they're professional agitators. Some of them were being paid. And then you'd have whole truckloads of implements showing up, like, shields for people to carry, signs that all look like they've been professionally made. Pallets of bricks are once again, by the way, pallets of bricks are once again showing up on street corners near the protests. Go figure. Who's paying for the pallets of bricks? I want to know. Something else I've seen, the other day we were joking about those Waymo cars, talking about, JP, the Waymos, the driverless cars. You can actually, out in California, they have a company called Waymo. Maybe it's other places too. But they're driverless cars, and it's kind of like an Uber. You get on the app, you order the Waymo, it comes to your location, you get in the back seat, it drives you somewhere, and then it returns to its docking station and waits to be called to the next ride. Okay, cool. Except that what they're doing, these rioters are now calling up the Waymos, having them drive into the riots, and then destroying the cars, burning them. I'm looking at a picture right now of one it's been totally gutted out, burned. It's got, graffiti sprayed or painted all over it, and one guy with a Mexican flag standing on top of it. A Mexican flag. Here's an idea. You want to wave the Mexican flag, go back to freaking Mexico. How about that? Go back to Mexico. But they are literally burning the American flag while waving the Mexican flag while standing on U.S. soil. They don't have the sense God gave a gnat. But they've got matches and they're burning stuff. John from Huntsville says, Phil, awesome monologue and happy Meatloaf Monday. You too, sir. Said also, did you hear that the Israeli commandos intercepted Greta Thunberg's Gaza-bound aid boat? He says, LOL, and I literally just did laugh out loud. Yes, I did hear that. Says, by the way, JP, I shouldn't have bragged about Auburn hosting a super regional baseball game because they lost 2 straight games and have been eliminated. I didn't realize they'd been eliminated. I knew they didn't start off right.
They got swept. They're out. So,
Nettie. What the heck?
I guess all of Alabama's at the house now.
Was it Coastal Carolina? It was a 2-game sweep.
Mm-hmm.
Coastal Carolina took them out twice.
Coastal Carolina's really good.
I don't care. They're Coastal Carolina.
Coastal Carolina won a championship a couple years ago. No, Coastal Carolina won it all like 4 or 5 years ago, I think. So yeah, they're not bad.
How does a high school team beat like Auburn?
Coastal Carolina is not a high school team.
They're like one step above a high school team.
Their mascot's like the God, I can't remember the name. It's like a different name for a hold on. I'm gonna look this up because I need to know the name of it. The Chanticleer, I guess, is a bird. But yeah, the Coastal Carolina Chanticleers, that's their mascot.
That's their mascot?
Mm-hmm.
We're the Coastal Carolina Chanticleers.
Yep, and they beat Auburn. So
that's just maddening. Okay. JT Lacey Springs says, quoting Phil Williams. Quoting Phil Williams in regards to Newsom, lead, follow, or get out of the way. Yes to Snake Plissken or Quigley. Quigley Down Under. That's a movie. Have you ever seen that one?
No.
God, JP, your education is so far from complete.
Sorry.
Quigley Down Under. This is, I think that Tom Selleck made one of the best cowboys ever on a movie.
Of course he did.
He's Tom Selleck. Bruce from Springville says, I have a question. Why do the Democrat politicians in California want death and destruction to happen to their people? Well, because they are so into their TDS, their Trump derangement syndrome, that nothing else matters anymore. It's all about oppose Trump. If this was Biden in office right now, and Biden decided to do a mass deportation, they would be saying, what can we do to help? But because it's Trump in office, we're absolutely seeing the mayhem, and we're seeing calls for more mayhem. Let me just go jump into some of my materials here. So I'm going to get into the legal version of why we're able to see this happening right now the way it is. But the first piece I'll bring up is just to let you know the local delegations for Alabama, Tennessee, and otherwise are calling this out, and they should. But the one example I've got here in my hands right now, and I've seen several from Senator Tommy Tuberville on social media, but 1819 News has a piece about U.S. Senator Katie Britt slamming Democrats and California's failed leadership as these violent, fiery riots rage in Los Angeles over the weekend. Britt went on to point out some of the same things I just did about, foreign nationals waving their foreign flags, obstructing traffic, throwing bricks at ICE vehicles, setting cars on fire. President Trump has had to send in the National Guard. There's allegedly a contingent of U.S. Marines from Camp Pendleton on standby. Katie Britt, our U.S. Senator, repeatedly called out the left for defending the riots, which failed presidential candidate Kamala Harris referred to as overwhelmingly peaceful. That's Kamala Harris for you. Nothing to see here, just a largely peaceful protest. Everybody move along. She did. She called it overwhelmingly peaceful. A written statement, by the way. Britt asked the question, why do the state of California and the city of Los Angeles want these dangerous, criminal, illegal aliens freely roaming their streets? And why are protesters rioting? The Trump administration is enforcing the law to keep Americans safe. The LAPD or LAPD police chief sort of destroyed the liberal narrative. You see, Trump had to call in the National Guard. And this is not normal, by the way. It's not often, and I'm a little bit in the weeds here, but I'll just tell you this. National Guard troops typically fall under the auspices of the governor's office for their state. And then they have to be federalized to active duty. So under the law, lawyer Phil talking for a minute, under the law, a National Guardsman is under what they called Title 32 of the U.S. Code. So a lot of times we refer to them as Title 32 soldiers. What that basically means is they can do state level duty and directed by their governor to do things. If they ever mobilize for war or get called up for some federal duty, there's a provision under Title 10 of the U.S. Code, which is where all active duty troops are. Title 10 of the U.S. Code gives the president command authority. If he needs those National Guard troops for something, which we saw many times during the deployments for Afghanistan and Iraq, if he needs those National Guard troops, he has to do what's called federalizing them under Title 10. It's very rare to see anything like this happen on U.S. soil. And you may ask, why is that? Well, there are laws against this. We don't want to return to the days of, troops being housed in your home and being able to come and take what they need out of your house, or troops being used to put down, civil, people who have civil claims. You don't want to see that kind of heavy-handedness that looks like a tyrant when the military moves in. But there are exceptions, and there should be. And the LAPD police chief, he said it flat out. He said this thing has gotten out of control. Meaning, he was asked, okay, the prevailing narrative, Democrats are saying President Trump is acting recklessly by sending the National Guard. Is he really? Well, no, the LAPD chief said, no, this thing's gotten out of control. Okay. So what are we getting here? What are we getting to with Trump calling the National Guard up? Well, first of all, what we're looking at is a president who wants law and order. Can you imagine if you were standing in your front door and you watched somebody across the street trying to burn down your neighbor's house and just standing there and watching it? Just watching it, got nothing, setting the trees on fire, burning the bushes, lighting up the house itself. Would you stand there and just say nothing? Would you call for law enforcement? That's what's happening in LA. That's what's happening in LA right now. You've got whole sections of the city where you have pallets of bricks that have been delivered by God knows who, paid for by we don't know who, and these pallets of bricks turn into projectiles that are being used to assault police officers and assault their vehicles. There are now, I've seen images of like up to half a dozen or more police vehicles destroyed in place as people were bombarding them from the top of overpasses. Well, Trump has called the National Guard, and this is unusual, like I said. For the National Guard to get federalized for duty on U.S. soil is very rare. When we get back to this break, I'm going to explain to you. So when you're having that water cooler conversation or talking with your friends at Sunday school or somebody around the table at work, and they say, well, how's he doing that? I'm about to give it to you. You're going to look like a brilliant individual sitting there in that conversation. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Y'all stay tuned. We'll be right back. And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Solid conservative, just plain right. Just saving the world one soundbite at a time. I tell you what, I got a Babylon Bee right here. I just saw it on social media. It has a picture of the riots, has a picture of the guy flying the Mexican flag as he stands atop a burning vehicle with all the mayhem going on around him. And all it says is illegals helped to film the Republican presidential campaign commercial. Yes, it's true. Yes. What do you got?
Oh, we got a comment here from Roxanne on Rumble. It says, question, can they use street cameras to see who's putting the pallets of bricks on the street?
If they've got them, yeah, I would hope so. Yeah, Roxanne, listen, is it Roxanne, is that right? I think absolutely anything's fair game. I mean, there's going to be a Ring doorbell, there's going to be a security camera, there's going to be a pod, there's going to be a traffic camera, something. I mean, for some reason, pallets of bricks just keep showing up. And it's like, nobody has any idea. Just the brick fairy just dropped them off, I guess. And that's just unacceptable. And I'd like to know, too, if they have any labeling on them that shows you where they came from, go find the pay records, see how they were paid for. Subpoena that bad boy. Find out. But I did see right now, I mean, listen, Bongino and Kash Patel. Kash Patel had a great tweet this morning, and I'm going to paraphrase it because I don't have it in front of me right now, but he said something along the lines of, we don't need permission to enforce the laws of the United States. And he said, if you are breaking the laws right now, we will find you. Listen, I'm for it. Hey, let's talk about the legalities of where we are right now. So Trump has called out the National Guard, which, like I said, the National Guard, when it's under Title 32 status, falls under the purview of the governor. Okay, how's he doing this? Well, there's a couple of things here. Number one, Trump has certain tools in the toolbox, if you will, one of which is actually called the Insurrection Act. You almost hate to hear that word because libs just abused it after January 6th, right? But in 2021, liberals just like took the word and made it their own. Kind of like they stole the rainbow for gay pride. They stole the word insurrection and made it their own thing. But the Insurrection Act of 1807 has been around for a while. It's been around on the books for use by a president to put down civil unrest. I mean, basically, it grants the president of the United States some broad authority, if you will, under the law, to use the U.S. military to suppress domestic unrest, including insurrections like actual attempts to overthrow the government, rebellions, or, and here's the or, other instances where state or federal laws are being obstructed or cannot be enforced. And in that case, it does allow the president to call up the National Guard and to federalize their forces to restore the order and ensure the enforcement of the laws. Okay, so I say all that to say, one of the things that Trump hasn't done yet, but he has allowed to do, is call out the National Guard for use under the Insurrection Act. He has to declare it, and he's given broad discretion on this. It's not like, well, Congress has to agree, and then the states have to, file a petition with the courts, and then we have to hold an Article 5 convention. No. The law gives the president the authority, given certain conditions, to declare the emergency under the Insurrection Act. It's been used 30 times in U.S. history. 30 times. Thomas Jefferson used it basically to, shut down protests around the Lake Champlain in 1808. I can see things like, right, of course, we had the Insurrection Act dealt with the American Civil War. So Abraham Lincoln declared secession of states in the American Civil War as an insurrection, and it was. In October of 1871, Ulysses S. Grant, as president, declared it to defeat white supremacists who were forming an insurgency in the former Confederate states. I can look forward. I can see things like, 1877, President Rutherford B. Hayes, a railroad strike across multiple states was shutting down the economy. He had to go in there and set things right. Most recently, I can look at things like Douglas MacArthur. As an Army general, he was given the authority to basically invoke the act against veterans who were marching on Washington, D.C. What? Yes. He was in the position where the law afforded him that capability. President Eisenhower in the after the Brown v. Board of Education case that desegregated schools, Arkansas was forbidding the desegregation of schools, and President Dwight D. Eisenhower ordered the National Guard to be federalized in order to be able to stand them down, because the governor was using his National Guard in violation of federal law to prohibit the ability of schools to desegregate. So Eisenhower said, nope, they're my troops today, and you're being ordered to stand down. And they did. John F. Kennedy invoked it at least 3 times, and they were all civil rights issues, 2 of which were in Alabama. One was when, of course, the infamous situation when Governor Wallace stood in the door of the classroom or the schoolhouse. And another in 1963 when National Guard was forbidding black students to go to all white schools, and they were federalized in order to stand down. And then the March to Selma, Montgomery in March of 1965. Listen, it's been all the way up to modern times. I'll tell you a couple more of those, but the Insurrection Act is real. It's purposeful. It's there, and Trump's about to have to use it. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Y'all stay tuned. We'll be right back. the international, and oh yeah, like the dude just said, solid conservative and just plain right. I mean, like, man, what a day. I'm watching right now. I got distracted there because listen, I can't guarantee you this is accurate and up to date because every once in a while you see a video and you think, is that real? Is that AI or is that old and it's just now being played? But it has a picture of a Marine Corps Cobra gunship flying over LA right now. But you know what? I had C-130s flying over my house in Gadsden just the other day. Didn't mean anything.
Well, I know there were Black Hawks apparently flying over LA. So,
well, Black Hawks are just troop carriers. This is a gunship.
Yeah, I don't know if a gunship was flying over.
and I doubt very seriously they're making gun runs on the protesters. Just, I don't see, Hellfire missiles coming out of the sky.
No, I don't either.
By the way, your grandfather, my dad, worked on the Hellfire missile project.
Really?
Yep. All right, so I'm in right now. I'm in this first dipper. We're going to unpack this thing in great detail. But right now, what we're looking at is LA is on fire. What is happening out there? And oh, by the way, how is Trump's legal standing with regards to whether he can, like, right now, he's called out the National Guard. I mean, okay, they're the California National Guard. How is Trump able to call them up when the law says they belong to the governor? The governor says he's not going to cooperate. Well, guess what? There are federal laws on the book that allow the federalization of state National Guard to quell violence and to preserve life, limb, and property, and that's where we are. Now, the Insurrection Act is one of the tools in the toolbox, and Trump has not, to my knowledge, declared an emergency under the auspices of the Insurrection Act. But I can tell you right now, y'all, like Ronald Reagan used it. He quelled a prison riot in Atlanta when there were Cuban detainees there who were rioting, and it was getting like horrible. He had to call in U.S. troops. I remember, wasn't it? I think it had to have been. Yeah, I think it was the 101st Airborne that was called in under Lyndon Johnson to bring order to violence in the South during the Civil Rights era. George H.W. Bush, the first George Bush, he had to call it up twice. The Insurrection Act once in the Virgin Islands, U.S. territory, to restore order after a hurricane had wiped out the islands and there was massive looting. But the other was the riots in Los Angeles. The Rodney King riots in Los Angeles, 1992. If you heard my monologue earlier, that's what I was talking about. The Rodney King riots, the race riots in South Central LA that spawned the rooftop Koreans and all that stuff that I talked about earlier, had 63 people that were killed, over $1 billion in property damage. It went on for 5 straight days. President George W. Bush was getting nothing out of local law enforcement. He sent in 15,000 military troops to quell the violence and to bring order to the streets because they weren't getting it done at the local level. So, interesting dynamic here is we're looking at riots in the streets of LA. The libs are freaking out and saying that Trump's a tyrant. He's calling out the military. Well, you won't do jack, will you? And where were you, by the way, when the race riots were going on and George W. Bush had to do it? So there's that, the Insurrection Act. How does he get around posse comitatus? If you're not familiar with posse comitatus, lawyer Phil again real quick. That's the law that's been on the books since 1878 that says that U.S. troops can typically not be used on U.S. soil. It's really bad form if you get down to it. It's really a big deal for federal troops to be used to enforce domestic policies. We are a nation that does not believe in, something that has no checks and balances on it. But there are exceptions. I mentioned the National Guard, there's that. But there are exceptions even to the use of U.S. military. And what you're going to find is if there is an unexpected emergency, and there's no other means to quell the issue, then the president can call up forces in order to preserve the safety and sanctity of law and order. He can. And I said a minute ago, one of the phrases they use is life, limb, and property. If the president sees a threat to life, limb, and property, and there's no other means at his disposal to assist, and local law enforcement can't get the job done, then posse comitatus can be suspended, and there you have it. I've got a great piece here. Oh, where'd it go? Hang on a second. I'm going to pull it up. It's in my stack. But I've got a piece here by Jonathan Turley, and he talks about this at length. And Jonathan Turley, being the legal scholar that he is, He's got some great writings on this. Well, somewhere in my stack is a Jonathan Turley. What'd you do with my Jonathan Turley article? Did you take my Jonathan Turley?
I can't say I did, unfortunately.
Give me back my Turley. Let me just do this. I'm going to go ahead and say that Jonathan Turley's a smart guy and he wrote some smart stuff about this. But the reality is, under the U.S. Code, there's also an exception that allows the president to declare an emergency where there is no other means. And I'm not talking about suspension of posse comitatus. I'm talking about literally not the Insurrection Act. I'm talking about literally under Title 10 U.S. Code that the president has the ability to intervene. What I'm trying to tell you right now is, if you're having that water cooler conversation with your friends, if you got a lib who's sitting at the table with you for dinner and they're taking issue, if you got a conversation going on at work, or you're just sitting around postulating, or you want to put something smart on social media, go ahead and use the words posse comitatus and the suspension of posse comitatus, the declaration of the Insurrection Act, the exceptions under Title 10 U.S. Code. The president of the United States right now is acting well within his authority to try and quell the violence that is tearing up the streets of a major American city. And he should, and he has to, and I'm glad he is. Now, listen, the Democrats, here's my Jonathan Turley. I'm looking right at it. It's got my notes written all over it. I accused you falsely. I apologize in front of God and country.
I accept your apology.
Thank you very much. It's Meatloaf Monday. I must have a hanger going on right now. There's a piece here by Jonathan Turley, and I have to point out, liberals, January 6th. I hate to impose it, but I got to talk about it. January 6th. You remember how one of the things that was being said about Donald Trump was that he failed to call out the National Guard. He knew he should have called out the National Guard. Why didn't he call out the National Guard? Insurrection. Okay. They were all about it then, weren't they? Now, he can't call out the National Guard. Why would he call out the National Guard? This is not an insurrection. Okay. They were all about it when it fit their narrative. Now here we are. Jonathan Turley points out that Trump has the authority under what is known as Section 12406 of Title 10 of the U.S. Code. Basically, if there is an inability of regular forces to execute the laws of the United States, he can indeed activate the state's National Guard. Doesn't even have to be an insurrection. There it is. Even Turley even points out that liberal legal pundits like Berkeley Law Dean Irwin have admitted that Trump does, unfortunately, they say, have the legal authority to do what he's doing. That's where we are. The world needs to know Trump has the actual authority to do it. And I have to wonder, where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? Because right now we're seeing things, it's not just pallets of bricks. It's not just Mexican flags. We're watching things like Town Hall has a piece that says that anti-ICE riots in LA have reached new levels where we're seeing deranged leftists torching cars. But what we're also seeing is we're hearing terrorist chants being heard among the mayhem. Trump's National Guard order came at the right moment. And now we actually, by the way, have U.S. Marines on standby at Camp Pendleton. I mean, this whole thing, y'all.
But I can figure out how this is all Trump's fault because, Bass and Newsom are saying that this has got to this level because Trump is bringing in the National Guard. That's circular reasoning because they wouldn't have to bring in the National Guard if it wasn't that bad. So how about you do something about your own state and city?
How about we go even one step further? How about the reason why Trump's having to do something is because they declared themselves a sanctuary state and a sanctuary city, and they have massive influxes of illegals, a number of whom have criminal records on top of being here illegally. And Trump is in there executing federal law to arrest and detain them. And they don't like that because they were already opposed to federal law on immigration. So now they want to oppose federal enforcement of federal law that they already opposed. I
can't handle the constant lying from them. It's like and the mostly peaceful protest narrative is back as if like our eyes are deceiving us. There's this thing called social media where we can actually see what's going on and your narrative isn't the only thing we have. So
and we're allowed to see it now.
You're just blatantly lying. So I'm not going to take it like that anymore. I'm just tired of the lying.
Rooftop Koreans, baby. Rooftop Koreans. I'm just saying. All right, take me to a break, JP. We'll take a break. We'll come right back. We'll start moving our way through the rest of this topic. But yes, if you got any input on this, if you want you want to give me your thoughts, tell me. And how do you feel about Kamala Harris, former Vice President of the United States of America, calling for the protest to continue? We'll be right back. And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio, solid conservative, just plain right, just pulling pins on truth grenades, man. I'll tell you what, Babylon B is on this thing like white on rice right now. Babylon B's got a new one. Here's the headline, has a picture of some soldiers. It says, Trump responds to the mostly peaceful protest with a mostly peaceful military. By the way, Libs of TikTok right after that is reporting that they have firsthand information, apparently, that 500 Marines were just deployed from Camp Pendleton, California. Says Trump is restoring law and order. And you know what? I don't think Trump's going to play around with this. I think he is going to restore law and order. It's just going to be firm and fast. And I will tell you, I was called up as a National Guardsman. I was called up for duty for a civil unrest. So I was in a recon company in the Georgia Guard for a while. They're the ones that sent me to Ranger School and all that kind of stuff. And our unit was a part of a large mobilization for what were expected to be major race riots. There was allegedly going to be a Klan rally in downtown Atlanta, and there was going to be a counter rally of Black activists who were going to be there. And there was all kinds of rhetoric going on. This is before social media. But there was still all kinds of discussion about what was going to happen and who was going to do what to who and all this stuff. And so they weren't playing. I want to say they mobilized several thousand National Guardsmen. And I was part of the mobilization. And we staged out of a big, I think we were like in a warehouse somewhere. I've forgotten where it was in near Atlanta. And then they took everybody in, and they literally had National Guardsmen standing like almost shoulder to shoulder, wearing riot shields, carrying sticks and body armor, and ringing like shoulder to shoulder around about a 4-block area. Helicopters flying overhead, Georgia Bureau of Investigation snipers on the rooftops, and the whole thing fizzled. I mean, like, I want to say like 4 Klansmen showed up with a flag and stood out there and said mean things, and the Black activists never showed up, and we all went home. Like, wow. That was like so anticlimactic. It wasn't even just, it was ridiculous.
It's funny how it sends a message when the National Guard's there.
But that's a point. And I think that's the point. We don't know what would have happened had they not taken the steps to mobilize. And that's the point. Trump is tired of watching American cities burn. The Biden administration was content to let things burn. And Kamala Harris funding the bail, for BLM rioters, and just ridiculous stuff. But we've got right now the fact that there are a number of things being said and done that are actually making things worse. I've got a piece right here. I pulled this one off of redstate.com. Red State talks about the number of official statements that are making things worse. Mayor Karen Bass, Democrat, mayor of Los Angeles, her statement: this morning we received reports of federal immigration enforcement actions. As a mayor of a proud city of immigrants who contribute, how about a mayor of citizens? Here's an idea. They contribute to our city in so many ways. I'm deeply angered by what has taken place. So the mayor is saying she's deeply angered. She says these tactics sow terror in our communities. How about the rioters? Do they sow terror? They disrupt basic principles of safety. How about looting, burning, and assaulting officers? Is that basic principles of safety? My office is in close coordination with immigrant rights community organizations. Oh, really? You're not in close coordination with law enforcement? Her last closing statement: we will not stand for this. I want to know who we is. Who's the we, Mayor? I think we is you. But then it gets wilder. Protests are marching. She's out there making statements to the press. We're going to fight for all Angelenos. Oh, we're going to fight now, says the mayor of the city. We're going to fight for all Angelenos, regardless of when they got here, whether they have papers or not. We're a city of immigrants. Okay. What you just heard there, people of California, is the elected mayor of one of the largest cities in the world just said, I don't care if you're here illegally or not. We're going to fight for you. What does that tell you? She's not interested at all about illegal immigration. She's not interested at all about whether or not there's law and order. She's encouraging the fight. Mayor Bass appears to be under the impression she can stop federal law, says Bill Malusian from Fox News, saying we will not stand for this. And then he asks flat out, what does this mean? How's she going to not let it stand? Then you got, others chiming in on it. And it's been a free for all. I mean, it's just something. But Kamala Harris may be the worst. Why? because she's supposed to know better. You know why? Because she's not only been the vice president of the United States with a call to allegedly supervise, govern, and be an executive for the entire nation. Before that, she was a U.S. senator for California. Before that, she was an attorney general for California. And before that, she was allegedly a district attorney in California. She prosecutes crime. Former Vice President Kamala Harris declared on Sunday she's supporting the anti-ICE protests. Oh my goodness, says Daily Wire. Harris has her home in Los Angeles. She's been mulling a run for California governor. She said in a statement that she is, quote, appalled at what we're witnessing on the streets of our city. But instead of focusing on how troublemakers hurled rocks and concrete and fireworks at federal officers, she took the opportunity to criticize them. Here's her quote. Deploying the National Guard is a dangerous escalation meant to provoke chaos. Meant to provoke chaos. No, Madam Vice President, it's meant to restore order. And she goes on to say, the administration's actions are not about public safety. They're about stoking fear of a community that demands dignity and due process. My gosh. I mean, do you think they believe what they say out loud? I mean, how much of this is a stage show and how much do they really believe of what they're saying?
They believe what they're saying.
You think?
I think because they don't like Trump that much, that they're so far down the hole that they've dug that anything Trump is for, they're against. So I genuinely think that their mind is just accustomed to blaming Trump, and that, well, if you didn't go in and wreak chaos and try to deport people, then we wouldn't have this problem. That's just so ridiculous in my opinion.
Their mental synapses are just so burnt right now when it comes to Trump that they'll say and do anything that's, as long as it's anti-Trump. Look, we get back from this, we're going to take a few text messages. And then we got a couple things we'll add to wrap this topic up. You got some feedback on this? Text us, 833-68-RIGHT. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. We'll be right back. And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio, solid conservative, just plain right, just covering down on some major ground across the southeast U.S. of A. Y'all, I'm talking about this show, this show. I mean, goes from like Huntsville back on over to Tuscaloosa. I'm talking about from Gadsden back on over, obviously from Tuscaloosa. Where am I going? I don't know where I am right now. Huntsville back over to Chattanooga.
You may just have to start over.
Tuscaloosa back on over to Gadsden. I mean, down to like Auburn and then across to Fort Benning and then North Georgia and Mississippi.
We cover ground.
This is what happens when there's so much input that I'm trying to watch TV.
There's too much stimulation.
Read social media. Text messages are coming in. I'm saying something from memory. By golly, I'm usually a multitasker, but that one just like fell apart.
It's just too much stimulation.
Daggum. But one thing I do know for sure, by the way, I do know for positive is that we got some brand new podcasts that are out. So came out last night was the most recent Controversial Mom is out, correct?
Correct.
And then as of today, I believe the most recent edition of Out of Right Field with you, JP,
Correct.
is out.
Correct.
Outstanding. The most recent edition of The Right Philosophy with me is in production, set to come out on a Wednesday. Am I correct?
Correct.
And what I'm most excited about is, not that I'm most excited about you, so just don't get hurt. All right.
I don't get my hurt feelings.
Okay. But what I'm also really excited about is the Just Right podcast, third edition is coming out tomorrow night, right? Tomorrow night, 6 p.m.?
6 p.m.
6 p.m. Listen, I'm going to tell you right now, you're going to want to see this one. Golly. I mean, this one wore me out. Some of y'all already know who I'm talking about. Her name is Thon Boyer. And Thon Boyer is got a remarkable story. She wrote a book called The Ground Kisser. But she was a Vietnamese immigrant, basically escaped from, communism on a refugee boat. They got interdicted by pirates. She wound up in a refugee camp. And then next thing you know, she lives in Alabama. And her story is absolutely amazing. So the Just Right podcast is what we call a long form podcast, where we literally do deep dive conversations with some of the most interesting people you will ever meet. We're putting another one in the can later this week. Excited about it. I'll tell you about it more later on. But yeah, Thon Boyer, it comes out tomorrow night. And listen, what I love about her is not only her sweet spirit, because she's got a wonderful spirit, but she's got a story and she is adamant about it. And she will tell people that unequivocally, part of her mission is to make sure that people understand what a great country they have and to thank every Vietnam veteran she can find. Oh, man. Listen, it comes out tomorrow night, the Just Right podcast. Stand by for that. I got some text messages. Let me get those real quick. Britt from Athens says JFK also called up the guard against George Wallace in July of '63 in Tuscaloosa. Yes, indeed. I think I covered that one. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Britt. Robert from Ardmore says, what happens if a member of the military ends up killing someone that's a United States citizen? Would or could lawyers and such try to go after a member of the military in that situation? No, very likely not, unless you can show that they were outside the line and scope of their duties. So let's say, here's a hypothetical for you, Robert. Let's say they're on guard duty, they've been armed, and there is someone who is putting, life at risk or burning property, and they take action and the protester dies. But they were given orders that your rules of engagement are to do certain things, and they did them. They're not going to be held accountable for that, in my opinion, or they shouldn't. But they likely would not. The UCMJ would likely not apply in that case. However, let's say that they have some downtime. They're off duty. They get drunk. They've got their weapon, and they go out there and they say, "I'm going to go shoot me a protester," and they do. Well, that's outside the line of scope of their duty. They would absolutely be liable. So there are moments, but like anybody else, it's just like a law enforcement officer. If they're doing their job, they're likely going to be okay unless it can be shown that excessive use of force or outside the rules of engagement or outside the line of scope of their duties. David at Bucky says, hey, Phil, remember the Kent State shooting? I do. That involved National Guard calls to quell anti-war protests in 1970. 4 students were killed. Others were wounded. Hope it doesn't happen again. Well, so do I, man. I do too. But like that situation I told you about with me getting called up in Georgia for Atlanta, a race riot. The race riots dissipated when the National Guard showed up in force. Bruce from Springville says, have you noticed when federal troops had to be used was when Democrats were in charge of the areas affected? Funny how that works, Bruce. Funny how that works. Thank you for drawing the analogy. You are correct, sir. Lou Ann from Huntsville says, my 2 cents on Kamala. Kamala does what the Borg tells her to do. She has been assimilated into the Borg. She's weighing in on the riots in an attempt to become relevant, but that ship has sailed. Said, frankly, I don't see her having enough gray matter to fully understand what's going on in this country. She has no clue how the illegal immigration has adversely affected our country, and I, for one, thank God she's not the commander-in-chief. Listen, Luann, you nailed it, and aren't we glad? Did we just dodge a bullet with her? Yes, we did. My gosh. I mean, what you got?
Well, I was just going to add another comment that we got. It's a question from Gina King on the YouTube. Says, will there be a nationwide injunction about activating the National Guard?
Say it again now.
Will there be a nationwide injunction about activating the National Guard?
No, I don't think so. I don't think they can. The nationwide injunction would have to show that the president was in violation of the laws. The Insurrection Act was put in place in 1807, I think it was. And then, the Posse Comitatus Act does have some prohibitions, but it doesn't stop the president from declaring an emergency under the Insurrection Act.
But if you're using rationale, we've seen that the left has not used rationale with previous courts.
Okay.
So I guess the question is, will they try to do it no matter what? Will there be an attempt for a nationwide injunction?
I don't think they can. I think it would get, I hesitate to use the phrase shot down, but I think it'd get shot down really quick. I mean, I think in that case that there's no way in the world you can look, I say this.
That's what I meant. Like,
I get it. I totally get it. I totally get it. I'm super frustrated that I have to caveat my comments by saying I totally get it.
When does common sense get in the way of what they want to do?
Yeah, no doubt. Here's the thing. I think some will try.
Yeah.
I don't think the courts will be allowed to. I don't think even a liberal judge will see this as a good idea, because they'll also be able to look at case precedent and they'll find Democrat presidents who have done the same thing. And they'll also look at case precedent and they'll see that this has been on the books since, for almost the entire length of our country's existence. And I think it's stood up to constitutional scrutiny many, many times, because one of the essential functions of government is law and order, and preserving the nation's good order and peace is a part of supporting and defending the Constitution. And so the president has no choice but to do it. In fact, he'd be negligent if he didn't.
Yeah,
I would argue.
I mean, if you got protesters dropping rocks from the top of bridges onto cops, and the state is just sitting back and obviously not doing a good job, like, it is the president's responsibility to do that, to protect the federal ICE agents. So yeah, I agree with you, but unfortunately they're going to try no matter what.
They are. Jay from Killing, Alabama. He says, I suspect there's going to be riots throughout the country in blue cities, and I believe there's going to be a lot of organization of paid protesters. Hope I'm wrong. Speaking of riots, or right now we'll call it protests. Speaking of organized
peaceful protests,
peaceful protests. You were telling me you and Butters actually brought up one today. I had seen it, but I hadn't read up on it. What do you know about that thing?
The No Kings Nationwide Day of Defiance on June 14th. So what's that? 5 days from now, and it's nationwide protests. There's several in Alabama. There's one in Huntsville and Jacksonville and Birmingham, Tuscaloosa, pretty much all the big, semi-big cities in Alabama. I would suspect the Huntsville one will be pretty big, just from past experiences on that. But I'm not sure what the exact rallying cry on this is, other than Trump bad. But I guess that's enough nowadays. And I assume these California riots are going to make it even worse.
Who's organizing this?
I don't know. I don't know. If you go to the website, I don't know if you see much about who exactly is organizing it. But it's
literally called No Kings.
No Kings, and No Kings Nationwide Day of Defiance. I think their website says something like, they've defied our courts, they've disappeared people, and now's our time to stand. No crown, no throne, no king, or something like that.
But what are we going to have? Like 3 Karens in their 70s standing out there with, signs that look like they're made, professionally somewhere, and leave the knitting club behind real quick and go protest for a few hours?
Unfortunately, don't underestimate the left's reason to show up and just
I'm not.
Scream and
I just spent an last hour and a half talking about it.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because Huntsville has had instances in the past where these whatever protests, they've shown up and been loud. And I remember in 2020, tear gas had to be deployed. So I don't know how big it'll be, but yeah, I think these riots are going to make these the protests even more prevalent, unfortunately. But we'll see.
Well, we'll see. And so they're calling. How many Alabama cities do they have listed in that? And then how about Tennessee? What about Tennessee cities too?
I have to go and look, get the exact number. But
I just see this being I see it being a thing in a few key places. I see it being a thing on social media, and I see it being a nothing burger in most locations listed. I think they're going to wind up having little paltry groups of about 7 that'll show up and go sing a spiritual, and then take a selfie and then head to the house. But some of them, we'll see. What do you got? Tennessee? You see it?
I'm having to count hand by hand. So it looks like we got 11 in Alabama.
Allegedly.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. A lot more in Tennessee. Looks like almost 20 to 30 in Tennessee.
So like go to the one for Huntsville. Where does it say they're going to meet? What does it tell you about it?
Campus 805, Butler Green.
Campus 805?
Campus 805. If I remember correctly, I think that's like...
Are these college campuses?
No. I think that's the old middle school. What's the name of the middle? It's a close to downtown. I don't know the name of the middle school, but it's got a restaurant there, I think, now in it. But it's near downtown Huntsville. It's Campus 805, I believe, is where that is. But yeah, that's where the information is on it. And there's an RSVP option. Saturday, June 14th, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m.
11 a.m. to 1 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be there for 3 hours. Come on out. We'll get a beer when it's done. And the axe throwing, it'll be great.
Yes, that place. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
I know exactly where we're talking about.
It's probably not a good place if you get axe
I probably don't need to name the business. I can name it right now, but I'm going to hold off on naming the business. But yes, there is axe throwing and beer and protests.
Yeah, that's not a good combo.
I'm laughing, but you know what? We'll see. Dave from Capshaw says, if we hadn't gone after Al Capone and his buddies and just left organized crime alone in the 1920s and 30s, we wouldn't have had to send in the feds, right? Sure. That's the way it works. Absolutely. And then Jay from Hartselle says, if they riot, Foot Lockers and liquor stores will lose more money than Trump's tariffs will ever cost them. Just saying. Perfect. Well put, Jay from Hartselle. All right. We're through with this topic, at least for now. But if you want to text in, you can text in and we'll take it. That's 833-687-4448, otherwise known as 833-68-RIGHT. Bill Williams, Rightside Radio. Y'all stay tuned. We'll be right back. And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Solid conservative, just plain right. Just bulletproof influence. That's where we are, just bulletproof influence. Speaking of which, bulletproof influence, we got a few more of those bulletproof influence highball glasses with the engraved Rightside Media logo and the embedded 308 round in the side of the glass. They're very cool. Check them out. You can see them at rightsidemedia.org. That's rightsidemedia.org. That's our website. Has a shop on there where you can buy all kinds of like coffee mugs, t-shirts, hats, stickers. And yes, our bulletproof influence highball glasses have to be one of the coolest things we've ever put in our merch store. So go check it out. Are we still doing the promo code? We are, aren't we? Still got a promo code. We're still pretty stoked about our new Just Right podcast. So right now there's a promo code. If you use the promo code Just Right, everything in the merch store online is 10% off if you use the promo code Just Right. We're not advertising that, by the way, to a whole lot of people, except the whole lot who are on the radio. So go for it. All right, I'm going to switch gears. You're welcome to keep texting in about LA, but I'm going to take a slightly different tack on this. Let me ask you a question. Are the people who are opposed to ICE coming out to California to round up illegal aliens, are they allowed to have their opinion? Dun, dun, dun. You can answer. Go ahead.
Yeah, they're allowed to have their opinion.
Yeah, they're allowed to have their opinion. Certainly they are. Absolutely they are.
Actually, they're entitled to their own opinion.
They're entitled to their own opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Perfectly said. And they are entitled to express their opinion.
Peacefully.
Mm-hmm. You can't go and throw a brick through a police car window and call that freedom of speech. You can't. You can't assault a police officer. You can't shut down a city block. You can't, burn a building. None of that is called free speech. That is not protesting. That is rioting. There is a difference. Where am I going with this? The next part of this, the second dipper of the day here is, I'm calling it the thought police, because there has been a real move in recent years by the left to not only curtail speech, but to tell you what you're even allowed to think. It's not just here. It's also in other places that are supposedly free. But I wrote a piece a few years ago, and I pulled it up just to give myself some reference. I hold a copy of it here in my calloused former paratrooper hands. And I make the analogy. Have you ever had, I don't know if y'all ever did this. I know you were raised with dogs in the house and we were too. We always had real fences, but I've had friends that had electric fences. You ever had those? The in the ground thing?
No, we have real fences, but I do know people who had electric.
Yeah, it has a little thing on the collar.
Yeah.
So if you're not familiar, it's real common. You don't want a fence in your whole yard, so you lay a wire in the ground, and that wire has an electric current, and that dog wears a little thing on its collar that if it crosses over that wire, it gets shocked, and it knows it. And now occasionally you find a really belligerent dog with a high threshold of discomfort, and it will just charge across anyway and go, wow. And then it's willing to sacrifice for the moment, for the freedom. But what also happens is very often you'll see a dog basically get trained by it. And the dog will not even question whether the power's on or not. Power can be off. It will not cross that line. It knows where the line is. I had a friend who actually had one. He lived on the edge of a river, and he had labs. And labs like water.
Mm-hmm.
And this lab was chasing a ball out of the water, and it went too far. And my friend actually had this all the way out into the water, so the dog couldn't swim away. He said, I thought I was going to have to rescue my dog. He said it shocked him, and he didn't know what was happening in the water. I'm saying all this for a reason. Even when the power's off, the dog knows not to go across the line. That's what happens when a government sets you up to believe that if you say certain things, do certain things, act a certain way, that you may get a visit from somebody. You may have some negative ramifications. We just like to stop by and chat with you. We want to talk with you a bit about your social media. If that's happening, that puts what's called a chilling effect on free speech. I mean, the Biden administration, they could care less. They were putting in the Office of Misinformation. They were colluding with, old social media, trying to make sure the narrative was what they wanted it to be. They actually had a direct line portal into the backside of Facebook and Twitter to make sure that certain things that were out there got shut down fast. This is why the Hunter Biden laptop went away. The Supreme Court of the United States put into effect what's called the chilling effect doctrine. And that's when you have official action taken by government to tell you what you're allowed to think or say. And they're not telling you, oh gosh, you still have a First Amendment right, but you just had it chilled. You just had it frosty. You just had it so frozen that you're not sure you even want to exercise it. It puts people into a place of, like the dog with not wanting to cross the line. They're just not sure they can cross the line because they're not sure what's going to happen to them if they do. Well, that's a thing. And that thought police is that can't be allowed to happen. And I think there's a lot of people out there in California right now who believe they're exercising some kind of First Amendment right, who have no idea that nothing in the First Amendment allows you to throw a brick. It doesn't. But when we get back from this break, I'm going to tell you about a few instances in which we're seeing some serious chilling effect put on free speech. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Y'all stay tuned. We'll be right back. Just plain right. Well, we're in number 2 of the Triple Dipper. I'm calling it the Thought Police. Before I do that, I got an announcement I got to make real quick. Just so as you know, every once in a while, Lawyer Phil got to do Lawyer Phil stuff for Lawyer Phil's clients. And so tomorrow is one of those days. I've got a client for whom I have to spend an unknown amount of time defending their interests on a case. So I will not be here tomorrow, but I'm pretty excited. You guys are going to enjoy our guest host, somebody who has been in the trenches, and we served together, actually. But former State Senator Scott Beeson, who has his own radio show down in Montgomery called Alabama Unfiltered. But former State Senator Scott Beeson and I served together in the Alabama Senate. He's a great guy. He's a former chairman of the Rules Committee, extremely conservative, big with Eagle Forum and a number of the other organizations. Scott Beeson is actually the one who was one of the authors and sponsors of the illegal immigration bill that we passed in 2011 or 12. So yeah, Scott Beeson will be here tomorrow, guest hosting for me with JP. JP, treat him right, man. He's a good dude. And he's a big dude. You may have to raise the microphone up for a little bit. Just saying.
Yes, sir.
Anyway, yeah, Scott Beeson will be here tomorrow, and I'll be back on Wednesday. But thank you all very much for already giving my friend Scott your keen attention and your grace. So I'm in this dipper called the Thought Police. I don't know if you saw it or not, but ABC News just had a couple of setbacks. So it's one thing to report a narrative. It's another to report something that is not the narrative as if it is. It's also another thing to pretend that you're objective when you're really not. ABC just had it handed to them most recently. The Supreme Court of the Supreme Court of the United States just recently ruled that the Trump administration is allowed to tell the AP they cannot come on Air Force One. I'm sorry. You just don't get carte blanche access to every location. You'll be able to print the stories. We'll make sure you have the information, but it doesn't mean that you have access to every place that the president goes. Well, there's that. One of the reasons why this is happening, and the press has to own it, is because for so long they have been distorting the truth and acting in conjunction with the government's thought police. ABC News, one of the worst among them. ABC News has a senior national correspondent named Terry Moran. You may recall Terry Moran did an interview with Trump just like last month or two, and it was very combative. It's like he was determined to get Trump. I'm going to get Trump. He allegedly is an objective reporter. Until apparently the other night, he had a few too many drinks and he decided to get on social media. Never a good combination. So Terry Moran went out there and just lambasted Donald Trump, lambasted Stephen Miller, called them world-class haters, said they eat their hate for spiritual nourishment. And all this is, it's like just went bananas. The government didn't have to do a thing. ABC took care of it themselves because they know we can't just be that allegedly objective force for news and have people that are going to act so subjectively. So ABC News has now let Terry Moran go. Now, that being said, does that mean he's not allowed to his opinion? No, he's allowed to his opinion. But there are prerequisites to his job. You know, it's like Karine Jean-Pierre. She's allowed to say certain things. She's not allowed to lie. There's a difference. And then you and I are not allowed to be told by the United States government or any state government or local government what we're allowed to think. We're not allowed to throw a brick through a window. There's that. We're not allowed to yell fire in the middle of a crowded theater. There's that. Other than that, we're allowed to have an opinion. But some of them just don't get it. And they keep rearing up this idea of having a thought police. Very disappointed to find out how liberal Hawaii really is. You ever been to Hawaii? I have yet to be to Hawaii.
I have not been to Hawaii.
It has not been on my bucket list, but I like Hawaii. We got, one of our listeners races out there in Hawaii, but Hawaii is extremely liberal politically. Babylon Bee just filed suit against Hawaii. Did you know that?
No.
Babylon Bee, the kings of satire, in my opinion. Babylon Bee just filed suit against the state of Hawaii because the state of Hawaii just passed a law that bans political satire. How do they do that? I mean, what were they? And the governor signed it, so it's the law right now until it's challenged. Well, it's being challenged by Babylon B, thank goodness. But yeah, they passed a law in Hawaii. It threatens, get this, jail time, fines, lawsuits, damages, and a 10-year disqualification from being allowed to hold public office if you are posting political satire images that are deemed to be quote unquote materially deceptive. You may ask yourself, what is materially deceptive? Were you asking yourself that?
I mean, I understand what they're saying, but yeah, it's subjective.
They have a definition.
Really?
Oh, they do. Materially deceptive is defined in the Hawaiian law as anything that would, quote, cause a reasonable viewer or listener to believe that the depicted individual engaged in the speech or conduct depicted. In other words, if it's political satire, but somebody might believe it because they're just ignorant as all get out, that could be materially deceptive.
Well, I know Newsom had a thing with Babylon B. I think it was earlier this year, kind of the same thing. And my initial reaction was, if you're so bad as a state government that when Babylon B writes something that's clearly a joke and satire, but you're such a bad governor that people may think you're actually doing those things, then I think you got a problem. It's like, something egregious and exaggerative and obviously not true. But if you're that bad of governor and people think, oh, I may actually be doing that.
If the Babylon Bee posted something that said that Donald Trump had dinner with aliens and eats the souls of children,
yeah,
there are people on the left who would believe it.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yes. Seth Dillon, who's the owner and CEO of the Babylon Bee, he told the Daily Wire in an interview, he says, we're used to getting pulled over by the joke police, but comedy is not a crime. He said, the First Amendment protects our right to tell jokes, whether it's election season or not. We're never going to stop fighting to defend that freedom. Well, so there's that. The thought police, they do what they do. But this is, as bad as that is in Hawaii, what's really disturbing was you find out there are Western nations, whole Western nations, that are beginning to do this. I got a story off Fox that I pulled. I pulled it this morning. It came out, Dateline today. You ever heard of a guy named Billboard Chris? I hadn't either.
Nope.
I know of him now because Billboard Chris is a guy who travels the world and he just walks through. All he does is he puts on those billboards you can wear over your shoulders. It's like a board with a message on it, and you got straps that hang it over front and back. And all he did was walk around. In this case, Brussels, Belgium. He and one other compatriot walked around Brussels, Belgium, wearing billboards, and all they said was, children are never born in the wrong body. And the other one said, children cannot consent to puberty blockers. They were arrested, strip searched, had their boards taken from them, and then released 3 hours later with no formal charges because the Brussels police felt like they were just a problem. Never mind the fact that people were throwing glass bottles at them. Never mind the fact that there were people shouting, all kinds of rude messages at them. They were the ones who were the problem because the thought police in Belgium is so prolific now. You're not allowed to just walk around calmly carrying a sign that says something that people differ with. That's where we're losing parts of the Western world to the thought police. It's gotten bad in the UK. And by the way, I love the UK. Bucket list item is to go back there. I lived there for 3 years, 7th, 8th, and 9th grade time frame. That's where I accepted Christ. That was my game changer. That was my life changer place, was to go to the UK and live just outside of London, England for 3 years. But right now, I got a piece that I pulled off of tabletmag.com, dated March of this year. British Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer said in an Oval Office conversation with Donald Trump, he said, we've had free speech for a very, very long time in the UK, and it will last for a very, very long time. But then he goes on to say, there have been many infringements on free speech that actually affect not just the British, but also American technology companies. Yes, let's not forget that it was only about a year or two ago, in the height of the world's crackdown on quote unquote misinformation, that the UK government was actually threatening to indict in absentia and then bring people back to the UK for trial from the United States if they said things on social media that were in violation of UK law. It's gotten way, way, way out of hand. Like, not a little bit, like way, way, way out of hand. Last one I'll just tell you is this. I got a piece from whitehouse.gov. I love this. The White House is really slapping back, and they're slapping back with facts, because the thought police are out there doing all they can do to change the narrative, to tell you not what to think and when to think it and how much you're allowed to think it. And, oh, by the way, here's why we want you to think it, and we'd rather you think this instead. Whitehouse.gov on April 29th put out a piece on the 100-day anniversary. They called it Hoaxes and Lies. 100 days of hoaxes cutting through the fake news. And they listed every single story that had been put out as a headline with a fact that controverted it. And it goes on and on and on. It's literally, how many pages have I got here? I've got 9 pages of these snippets. Example, fake news. CNN attempted to, quote unquote, fact check President Trump, claiming that the Biden administration spent millions on making mice transgender. It was actually debunked. They were forced to update their story later and admit that it was true. There had been a study spending millions to see whether or not they could make mice transgender. You had the fake news story when the Department of Defense removed General Colin Powell's name from a list of Americans at Arlington Cemetery. He was never removed. His name still remains among the listed. You had Representative Eric Swalwell claiming that no president ever presided over more plane crashes. Actually, that was nowhere near true. There were more in Biden's inaugural year than there were any other. It goes on and on and on. But what I'm telling you, folks, is the thought police and their allies in the mainstream media, it's ugly, and it needs to stop. You are not going to be in a position to know the truth if the media is allowed to lie. At the same time, there never should be a time when the government creates the narrative and tells the media what it's allowed to report. And none of it should be allowed to tell you that you're in trouble if you think differently. You're not allowed to throw a brick through a windshield. You're not allowed to yell fire in a crowded theater. But you're absolutely allowed to your opinion, and you're absolutely allowed to research that opinion and even express that opinion. That's just the way it is. Thought police. Can't have it. All right, we're taking a break. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Y'all stay tuned. We'll be right back. And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Solid conservative, just plain right. Saving the world one soundbite at a time. Giving you all the truth you can slap on a bumper sticker. I got several text messages. Let me get caught up with you guys. We got a meme from Dave from Capshaw. Says, we recognize John Adams. Picture of John Adams. We recognize no sovereign but God and no king but Jesus. I like it. Stephen from Athens checked in, said, oh, yeah, that was a Stone Middle School. I just said it. Okay, I wasn't going to say it earlier, but there it is. I don't want to give them anyway. Bottom line is, there it is. Everybody knows. Barry from Huntsville says, why is Stephen Miller livid towards Musk? His wife chose to go with the richest man in the world rather than stay working for the most powerful man in the world. The black eye on Musk was not caused by X, but by a punch from Miller, who is left-handed, just saying. I heard it was actually more like a scuffle with Scott Bessent. Which is the weirdest story I think I've ever heard.
Yeah.
And it's also just so unnecessary. But apparently what we know now, and it was almost, I saw an interview with Caroline Levitt this weekend. I don't know if you saw it or not, Sunday morning with Maria Bartiromo. And she was asked, and she did not deny that it happened, but apparently Musk didn't like Bessent. Bessent said Musk was a fraud. Musk got in his face and like chest butted him or something, and it caused Bessent to swing a punch, and that's why the black eye.
Yeah, and it's
in the White House.
The Washington Post article, which talked about that and other things, kind of explained the buildup. So it wasn't just out of nowhere. Like, there were behind the scenes tensions rising for quite some time.
Yeah,
and I think apparently the straw that broke the camel's back was Trump denying Isaacman from the NASA job, which is Elon's friend. So I think that pissed that was kind of what
Trump denied. What
Isaacman, I think his name was,
yeah.
the guy that Elon suggested to be the head of NASA, and Trump administration denied him. And so I think that was kind of what the straw that broke the camel's back. But yeah, there was stuff building up for a while.
It's ugly. I hope they get that back in order. I hope that relationship gets repaired. I think right now there's been some pretty big damage done to the relationship between Trump and Musk. I just hope at some point they become people who can work together again, at the very least. I think they're better. I think they're better together in some ways. Dustin from Hazel Green says, Phil, what legally constitutes domestic terrorism? At what point does a riot become the same thing? I mean, they've been violent for political purposes, but what level does that have to rise to? Well, Dustin, I mean, I don't know that I have the legal terminology in front of me as defined by the U.S. Code. But terrorism actually is defined. You're right. I think in this case, you've got rioting. Terrorism is designed for the sole purpose of taking life and destroying property, whereas rioting is something that is a expression of outrage that becomes a group thing that creates havoc in the streets. And I'm giving you a paraphrase, but that's my recollection of it. Brad from Laredo, Tennessee says, charge $20 to push the button. You'll take care of the national debt in less than a month. What are we talking about? Charge $20 to push the button. What button are we talking about? You'll take care of the national debt.
I don't know what button.
I don't either. About. I want to know where this button is. Pray tell. Brad, what button do we have? Kimball from Harvest says, Phil, there's so many people in this country who have no idea what their God-given rights are, where they start and where they end. This is due to a lack of education, no teaching in the home, general godlessness. Said, I'm grateful to have been taught by my parents about these things, patriotism, duty, and to keep the commandments. You know what? As a matter of fact, I highly recommend some of the books that are made for kids right now. And I think Rush Limbaugh even had some back in the day that were designed for kids to teach the Constitution and to teach things like character and, and work ethic and patriotism. And so, teach those things to your kids and then teach them scripture and take them to church. What we told in Proverbs, raise up a child the way they should go, and when they get old, they will not depart from it. I believe that with all my heart. Scott from Decatur says, Phil, do you remember the Orion's amicus brief? The Onion's amicus brief. Oh, the Onion. I need to look back up. I had forgotten about that one. I will check it out. Thank you, Scott. Coming right back, Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. We'll be right back. Hey, all you Rightside ruffians out there, you are listening to Rightside Radio, solid conservative, just plain right. And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio, solid conservative and just plain right. Just covering down on some major ground across the southeast U.S. of A. Y'all, I'm talking about this show. Whew, I mean, it goes from like Huntsville back on over to Chattanooga. I'm talking about from Tuscaloosa back on over to Gadsden. I mean, all the way down to that lovely little village on the plains we call Auburn. It's right across the border to what we get to call, once again, Fort Benning. It's Fort Benning. And then big old patches of North Georgia and Mississippi all thrown in just for good measure. And that's just the radio audience. And there's all y'all in the big wide world going to the World Wide Web and tuning in every single day on YouTube and X and Facebook and all of it. And then some of y'all picking it up my podcast later on. Anyway, the bottom line is we love you. We love this audience. We love how big y'all are. And we appreciate the fact that Rightside ruffians everywhere are participating in this movement. And we thank you for your time. I got a couple of quick text messages before I go to the phones. David at Bucky's says, Phil, did you see this headline from the Babylon Bee? I bet. Oh, no, I did not see that one. Mexican rioter adds a lime wedge to his Molotov cocktail. Nice. Well played, sir. Brad from Laredo, Tennessee says, we need a shot collar for liberals. Oh, so the button.
Yeah.
The button. I like it. And then we just hit the button. I'm sorry, Maxine Waters. Did you feel that? I'm sorry, Gavin Newsom.
I'd like to use my congressional authority to go in there.
Oh, my gosh. That was one of the funniest things that happened this morning, by the way. If you didn't see it, Maxine Waters doing another one of her cartoonish, where she gets out there and says, I'm here right now to use my congressional authority. I want to see inside this building. And the National Guard just shut the door in her face and went inside.
I need to get in, and tried to tug it. Yeah.
John from Huntsville says, Phil, isn't there supposed to be like a mandatory brain requirement to be able to join the thought police? No, there's actually not. Not at all. None. Let me go to the phones right now. Phones, by the way, if you hadn't figured it out, our phones, we are still working with the new phone company to get our old number imported so we don't have to use to lose the 83368 right number. It's being put into our system. They're in the approval process. JP talked to them today. In the meantime, we have a temporary fix that we're able to send out to certain people. We just can't open it up to everybody because then we're like confusing the world with a phone number that won't be there 5 days from now. In the meantime, Jeff Rowe from Indiana is on the line. Hey, buddy, how you doing?
You know, Phil, it's amazing that
the
Congress will pass the big, beautiful bill
oh, God.
before you get up on the line.
You know, I didn't even bother reading out that text when you sent that in earlier. I
knew you wouldn't read it, but I had to tell you.
I know. Well, you know what?
Gosh.
If this thing, if our phone number moves at the speed of Congress, that is pretty glacial, I will admit. But we're getting there, man. We're getting there. But at least we're talking right now. You're driving and we're talking.
There you go. Yes, we are. Well, I'm driving very slowly. I'm going in front. I'm in front of the brand new stadium in Nashville here. That's not quite done yet.
Oh yeah. Well, all right. So you're creeping your way through Nashville. What do you think about all the stuff we've been talking about today, man? You've been watching this LA riot stuff?
Oh yeah, it's ridiculous. I mean, like I say, they need to, put it down. And the thing I'm worried about is, they're talking about taking away the National Guard. Well, then I guess Trump's saying something about putting the Marines in. I think
yeah, and they just announced that.
Those guys don't.
The Marines they
don't play nice.
The Marines just mobilized. In fact, I got a story here on Fox News that says that 2,000 National Guardsmen have already been activated, and Trump just sent in a battalion of 500 U.S. Marines from Camp Pendleton. So yeah, I mean they're beefing up.
You start throwing rocks at Marines, they might treat you like the Israelis treat the Palestinians. They might answer with bullets.
Well,
and I don't blame them because if you're throwing a deadly projectile at somebody and could hurt or kill them.
I'm just wondering how they're going to arm them.
Is out here in Blazing. Go ahead.
I said I'm wondering how they're going to arm them because when I was actually mobilized for a civil disturbance once, and there were we had no rifles, but we did have riot sticks. We had riot sticks, face shields, and body armor. And I'm wondering, are they going to send the Marines in with loaded weapons, or are they going to send them in as a show of force using their armored vehicles to help, move things off the streets and all that kind of stuff?
Well, I hope they would send them in armed. I mean, I wouldn't send the cop in unarmed. I would send so I wouldn't send the Marines in unarmed either. So I mean, it's.
I think they're also
When
going to. They may also be using the military to help with setting up detention centers, like putting up barbed wire and setting up encampments, because they're going to have so many detainees. They're going to have to arrest them, bring them into a tent, keep them chained to a shackled to a pole, and then ship them out.
I was going to say the feds would have to be doing that, because according to California or LA law and everything, I guess it's still cashless bail out there, isn't it? No bail. So it just be, let's take them in and then let's turn them right back out. So
yeah, but I don't think California can set bail on federal law. So if federal crimes have been committed and federal crimes are what you're being indicted or arrested for, then federal bail provisions are what's going to apply. But I did just see, by the way, we were watching the news here a moment ago during the break here in the studio, and they just announced that California is filing suit against the Trump administration, like for daring to deploy the National Guard.
Well, if they get a California judge and everything, they might just take him and impeach him or something. I guess, I don't know, because apparently these federal judges that are liberal have all the power in the world.
Well, they're out there in the Ninth Circuit area, and that's like the dark side of the moon when it comes to the law. But I think they'll probably have to. This thing, if it doesn't rule in the Trump's favor, it'll go up through the appeals process. There ain't no way in the world someone can say that the president does not have the authority to issue an emergency proclamation and call up National Guard. I mean, it's in the law. It's been there since time immemorial at this point.
But everything's a delay. That's the problem.
That's exactly right.
They can sit on it. So, and Supreme Court, they don't move at very, very fast speeds either. When they send something back down to a lower court or whatever, and then they mess with it again. They don't have to do it immediately. They can just sit on it as long as they want to, apparently.
Well,
So
sometimes they
really
do.
Matter.
Sometimes they do. But when it comes to an issue of, in this case, again, I keep using the term, but it's life, limb, or property. They'll have to act fast because if there's a question of civil unrest or, emergency proclamations and the Supreme Court has to weigh in, they can't sit on it. They have to take immediate action.
Well, that's good. I mean, because like I say, everything they do is to delay the inevitable, and they just keep delaying. So that's the name of the game in the liberal world, anyway.
Well, it is right now. They're trying to run the clock out. They'll do everything they can to delay and obfuscate and just run the clock out. But at some point, the Supreme Court of the United States is going to have to weigh in on these national injunctions and upon the inability of the Trump administration to be allowed to move forward with some of its policies. It's absolutely lawfare. I mean, there's no way around it. It just absolutely is.
Yeah, it's kind of like the trouble is with the courts and everything is the courts decide what the courts can do. It's like it's a one way thing, and everything. Nobody else gets to decide what the courts can do except for the courts. So it's kind of self-serving, I think.
Well, there are days, but that's why the courts can only do what the laws portray. So if the laws can be changed, then change them, and that's one of the things that has to happen. But anyway, listen, I think what we're watching right now, though, is the Trump administration is about to restore law and order. I'm thinking this lawsuit with California may wind up being moot pretty quick because Trump's going to wind up seeing law and order restored by tomorrow, I hope, and put the streets back in order. At that point, what are you suing for? But we'll wait and see.
It doesn't really matter if they're trying to tell him that only California can deploy the National Guard, because he can deploy the Marines no matter what. They're not part of California's.
That's exactly right.
National Guard. So it doesn't really matter. The point is mute.
And you remember when the liberals were just excoriating Trump because they said he would not call the National Guard out for the January 6th insurrection, and they were all about having the National Guard then.
Oh yeah, and like I say, Nancy Pelosi said she should have, and and she was the one that denied them coming in. So,
Nancy
and
Pelosi.
she was the one who had authority over that. So,
Has Nancy
you know,
Pelosi has Nancy Pelosi spoken
No,
out
you
about these riots yet? I haven't seen that yet. I don't think she has. All right. Hey, listen, real quick before I go, did you hear my monologue about rooftop Koreans? What do you think about that?
oh yeah. Well, I think it's great. I think everybody should be a rooftop Korean, and some, because if someone was coming to burn my house down and everything, you're not going to get within the length it takes to throw a Molotov cocktail before I gun you down, because I'm going to stand my ground. And it's just like I say, why don't people play out here in the middle of the interstate? There's a reason for that.
There's a reason for that.
Yeah, there's a reason why people don't play out in the middle of the interstate, because they know if they do, they may get killed or hurt or whatever. So the same goes as if you're going to approach somebody's property and you know that they're armed and will gun you down. It's the same thing as playing in the middle of the interstate to me.
Well, and
what you get.
Most states have a version of what's known as the Castle Doctrine, and that says that if you are being attacked, if you feel like there's a threat again to your life or to the sanctity of your home or your business or even inside your vehicle, the Castle Doctrine allows you to defend yourself even to the extent of using deadly force. But
try that in New York City or Chicago.
Oh, there are venues where it doesn't work. You're exactly right. Hey, brother, we got to take a break right now. You be safe on the road, man.
You have a good one, Phil.
All right, we'll see you, bud.
Good luck tomorrow.
All right, listen, I got a couple of text messages coming in. We'll take a break. We'll come right back. You got thoughts on this? Close me out for the day. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio, 833-687-4448. That's 833-68-RIGHT. We'll be right back. And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Solid, conservative, and just plain right. Making common sense like a superpower. All right, I don't usually promote somebody else's social media on my show. You can always follow us. You can get me on Twitter or X at @SinPhilWilliams. But there's a guy. So earlier in the show, if you heard my monologue, with regards to the LA riots, I talked about the 1992 LA riots and a group that became a phenomenon. They became a legend, and they're still referred to these days as the Rooftop Koreans. If you did not hear my monologue, I encourage you to pick it up on podcast later. But the Rooftop Koreans were a group of Korean Americans, many of whom had served in the South Korean military. They immigrated to the United States. They were living the American dream, and they were doing all they could to be industrious and set up their businesses. And they'd set up everything from dry cleaners to restaurants to, small stores and shops and newsstands. And there was an area of South Central LA that became known as Koreatown. There was a huge influx of Korean migrants, and they began to kind of coalesce in a certain general area. And during the 1992 Rodney King riots, the tensions that had been boiling for a while between the Black community, especially the Black activist community, and the Korean American community began to boil over. And any excuse to riot, burn, or take out your angst during the 5 to 6 day Rodney King riots was just fine. Anything goes. The rioters were literally beating people in the streets on live TV. They were burning whole buildings and robbing stores and looting. Well, this group of Koreans decided, ain't having none of it. No, not on our watch. We didn't come here and put everything we had into building something just to watch you burn it down. 63 people died. Over $1 billion in property damage in the 1992 riots that lasted for 5 days. Right now, 5 days. Right now, we're on the 4th day of the rioting in LA right now. It's not on the same scale, praise God. But the Rooftop Koreans, they literally armed themselves. They got walkie-talkies, and they stood on the roofs of their buildings, and they took pot shots at people that tried to loot their businesses. Nobody died. They didn't kill anybody, but they sure stood on the roof, and they stood in the gap, basically. So there's one guy I said about following social media. There's one guy that I started following just in the last few days because I've discovered him. And so his name is Tony Moon. And on X, his handle is @RoofKorean7. @RoofKorean7. Here's how he describes himself. American patriot, follower of Jesus, 1992 OG Rooftop Korean, 2021 anti-vaxxer Antifa hunter, 2021 J6 DC tourist, and I'm on the no-fly list with a TSA.
That's quite the resume.
That's like all of it wrapped up in one. That man, if I could get him a Rightside Ruffian T-shirt, I would. But he is absolutely an OG ruffian. His account has spiked. Like when I first saw him the other day, I think he had 81,000 followers. He's got 96,000 now. Because he's talking about memories of being there in that time. And he says this in one of his pinned tweets. He says, defending 3 square miles of Koreatown is different than defending pockets of different neighborhoods throughout LA County. He says, locals are going to have to defend their hood, set up a rotation to control the access, work in shifts, use cell phone tech or short distance two-way radios to communicate, watch for vehicles and occupants that keep showing up and looking at homes and businesses up and down the street. They could be scouts. He's basically talking from experience.
Yeah.
So
that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So anyway, one of the OG ruffians is still out there, or OG Rooftop Koreans, and it sounds to me like he's a Rightside ruffian. That's all I got to say. Tony Moon is his name. You can follow him on Twitter.
So I never even heard of the Rooftop Koreans until I think Trump Jr. said something about how the rioters think this is all fun and games till the roofs start speaking Korean. Like that. I never heard of them before.
Oh, that's too good. All right, the grades are in. John from Huntsville says JP and Jeff from Indiana both get a solid A for their solid Meatloaf Monday performances, which means today's winner with an A double plus is the always full of wisdom, Phil Williams. Thank you, John. Appreciate you. He says, congratulations, and I'm really looking forward to your guest fill-in tomorrow. Yeah, former state senator, very conservative dude, radio guy himself, Scott Beeson, will be here in studio filling in for me while I go do legal work for one of my wonderful clients. Allie from Athens says, Phil, Have Tony Moon on the show. We should figure that out. I need to get Tony Moon on the show.
Yeah, reach out to him somehow.
I think I need to. Listen, I'm going to find a way. Tom from Decatur says, you think that the $1 billion that Kamala mysteriously lost during the election will end up bailing these violent protesters out? Shoot. You know what? She wouldn't spend it on anybody but herself. How about that? But I do think that there's going to be people setting up GoFundMes to bail people out. Kenneth from Somerville says, I don't see the logic of not letting the bluest of blue cities burn to the ground. When your enemy's making a mistake, don't interrupt them. Yeah, but you know what, though? There's a whole lot of good people there, a whole lot of quiet, good people. A lot of conservatives live out there. And I mean, the reality is, I don't care if they're conservative or not. If they're peaceful, law-abiding Americans and they have a differing view than me, so be it. And by the way, I've lived out there. I don't want to lose Los Angeles. It's still the city of angels. It's a beautiful place. It just has politics that suck. Graham from Meridianville says, I haven't seen the Dems this mad since 1954 when Eisenhower sent the 101st Airborne Division to Little Rock to force Democrats to let black children go to school with their children. There you go. Kevin from Hartselle says, remember the oath. Defend against foreign and domestic. This case is both. Yes, it is. And then last one for the day, Adam from Athens says, Phil, did you see the Australian journalist who got shot with a beanbag? I did. She had something to say about it too. Just saying.
I mean, in her defense, I'd be pretty pissed off too. I saw the video and she wasn't doing anything. She just kind of was. She was starting to walk backwards, and then the dude just pelted her.
She wasn't, but you know what? When you walk out into a free fire zone,
yeah, I guess but,
you may catch a round. Just saying. All right, listen, that's an amazing day. You guys are an amazing audience, and we love you, every single one of you. And I mean what I say every time I say it, that we do what we do right now. We spend our time